Hello, and thank you so much for checking out the video. This is Sho, and sometime back, a little Kickstarter by the developers of Suikoden 2 caught my eye. I considered backing it, however, there was no solid claim that it would receive a Switch release, so I eased up and let it go. Then, to my little heart's desire, Famitsu had revealed late April that a prologue of the game would be released on the Switch in mid-May. So, for this video, we're going to look at Eiyuden Chronicle Rising. For the uninitiated, Eiyuden Chronicle, or literally the heroic tale of 100 heroes, is a Kickstarter series that brings together Yoshitaka Murayama and Junko Kawano of Suikoden fame after a very long 25 years. The series is quite clearly meant to be a spiritual successor to the famed Konami franchise of Suikoden, given as both Murayama-san and Kawano-san developed the first Suikoden, as well as had hands in number 2 and 4, respectively. As for the Suikoden series itself, it's far too robust to be in a review video such as this. Just know that it was an absolute epic jrpg based on the actual story of Suikoden, or Water Margin as it's known in English, that had you recruit hundreds of characters on an epic, grand, massive adventure. Now, the original Eiyuden Chronicle concept follows this with the actual jrpg turn-based affair releasing in 2023. As an appetizer of sorts, and to get people invested in the story, lore, characters, an action RPG, Rising, was announced as a prologue of sorts. The story follows a young treasure explorer named CJ as she arrives in a town called New Neva. Upon hearing stories of adventurers rushing here for treasure a la Gold Rush style. After arriving, flat broke of course, she takes on odd jobs around the town via stamp guard to earn enough labor fees, so to speak, in order to get a license to adventure in the ruins around town. Along the way, you'll join forces with Garo, an anthropomorphic kangaroo a la Akira Kurosawa, and Aisha, the mysterious and really good temporary mayor of the town, as you explore the ruins and come to understand the town's mysteries. For the story itself, it's honestly compelling enough. CJ, Garo, and Aisha all have distinct personalities and are honestly a trip with each other. The dynamic between Garo and CJ especially sticks out, and Aisha brings, a lot to the table, offering a more serious and emotional perspective. In all, I think it does well in opening up the player to the basic premise of the world in Eiyuden, and this is further reinforced by the aforementioned stamp card system. What, you thought this was just a story-driven plot point? Nope, it's a real in-game mechanic. As you make your way around town, you'll come across a plethora of people that need your support. As such, you'll be tasked with talking, crafting, and many other tasks in order to help the good folks out. What I really appreciate with this system is the constant change that you see based on your actions. At first, much of the town is closed off and essentially just collapsed buildings. However, as you progress in the story, new buildings get erected, more people show up to the town, and you honestly see the town grow and refine itself. This, for me at least, hits the dopamine hard, as I always enjoy watching my actions kind of grow and show an actual effect to the environment. With that said, there is a massive criticism of the system, and it's simply that there's way too many side quests. I mean, really. You have the first silver point stamp card of around 30 stamps, so 30 quests. Once you complete that, you get the gold stamp card, which is completely blank with 50 stamp slots. And then you can guess what happens when the gold card gets fully complete. In principle, the game offers, I'd say, around 180 side quests off the top of my head. Naturally, this makes some of the later quests kind of, really boring actually. Even though there might be nice small modifications to the town, there are just a lot of simple quests that all they do is expand your store options. Which is, I guess, a critical point of the game, as the shops are the only way to upgrade your gear and tools for better fighting and more exploration possibility. So, skipping side quests generally doesn't work in your favor, as you'll need those upgrades down the line. As for the presentation and visuals, I absolutely love the style. The best word I can use is wholesome. It uses a combination of 3D sprites on a side-scrolling map with beautifully rendered backgrounds and effects. The overall aesthetic screams 90s era JRPGs and just looks wonderful. The audio also ties in very nicely. In general, tracks are fun and energetic when need be, and each zone has a nice, distinct sound that really brings out its artistic design. Additionally, overall sound effects for attacks in the environment help with that extra level of immersion. At no point was I ever really annoyed with anything to what I was listening to. Performance-wise, I've noticed very little issues. As this game is an action RPG, input delays and drops can be very critical. However, I've yet to notice anything that harms the experience. The textures in some places are a little grainy, but everything, at least for me, tends to blend nicely with its color palette. Controls are firm and respond fairly well in many cases. The only issues I had with the controls itself basically came down to needing better upgrades for more mobility and such. I don't really think I had any issues with the input delay at all. As stated before, Rising is an action RPG that feels a bit more like a Metroidvania with heavy RPG elements. Zones are done in a side-scrolling fashion, very much like the classic Metroidvanias, and you'll be able to control your three main party members dynamically as you adventure through each area. By pressing the Y button, you'll be able to attack and combo nimbly as CJ. Pressing the X button switches over to Garo, allowing for his more heavy defense attacks and skills to be used. Finally, pressing A brings Aisha to the field, allowing you to utilize her magic-based skills. Each of our heroes has a unique skill that's set to the ZR button that they can use when they are on the screen. CJ allows for a quick dash, Garo parries and blocks, Aisha teleports a small distance. Do note at first that these skills are limited in scale. For instance, CJ's dash can only be used on the ground. However, as you level up your gear, these skills also extend and expand in their utility, allowing for more use in battle and during explorations. A final point then are the link attacks. This is a mechanic that allows you to combo between your characters by pressing one of the other character's attack buttons mid-combo. You'll know if you're successful as you'll hear a clicking clap sound, and then you'll see the comboing character rushing in with some nice invulnerability frames, dealing a hard-hitting special attack. This can be done up to 3 times, however, certain requirements can be unlocked late game that allow for unlimited link attacks. Also, you do have access to battle items like potions and pots from your stow pack. At first, you only have access to 5 items at a time when you're in the field, however, later upgrades provide more slots. This brings us to, I guess, one of the best things for me with Metroidvanias, and that's the gear. Gear in Rising is based on 2 fronts. You have equipables, such as rune lenses and accessories, and core upgrades that provide standard stat increases alongside your level. All characters can equip 2 accessories and runes. Accessories are your standard fare. You got your stat buffs, and you can gain bonuses to your drops, things like that. Runes are basically elemental attributes that provide your gear enhancements. In Rising, you have access to earth, ice, lightning, and fire runes. By equipping one in your attack slot, you can add that element to your basic attacks. Naturally, this helps with damage output, but do note that enemies resistant to your equipped element will take less damage overall. Of course then, by equipping a rune in the defensive element slot, this grants you resistance to said element and any status effects such as Paralyze that element can hit you with. Additionally, on the exploration side of things, there will be crystal pillars that are elementally charged. So, to progress in some areas, you'll need to attack that crystal with the necessary element to proceed. Therefore, it's best to keep a good collection of multiple runes around to make sure that your party is well protected in the field. As for the general upgrades, this is 100% contingent on the side quest town building aspect of the game. All upgrades to weapons, armors, bags, lenses, even general core stat buffs and stats happen by upgrading the town and then providing necessary money and items to get that upgrade. This isn't too challenging in principle, however, for the first half of the game or so, getting money can be really challenging due to some plot devices. However, around the mid to late point of the game, getting money becomes much easier. I would always recommend getting as many items as you can per venture out and stock your resource bag to max before coming back. This way, you are able to prep items that you may actually need before it comes up in a side quest. Plus, if you end up coming across any upgrades, it allows for smooth and quick upgrades. And having excess stock of these items also lets you sell any bonuses or extras you have in the pawn shop for that extra cheese. For the overall experience, I would say it's fairly straightforward, with many mechanics that are standard for the genre. It's very easy to pick up and master quickly. Plus, the game provides many opportunities for exploration and resource gathering. So, if by chance you're not doing so well, a few quick trips to the Great Forest can turn you right around. Definitely great for newcomers to the genre, myself included. There are no difficulty settings in Rising. However, there is an action settings option that basically makes the link attack system easier to handle. This lets players who are not as familiar with Metroidvanias have an easier experience in comboing. I kept this option off despite my lack of skill in the genre, and honestly my overall experience was straightforward. Now, I do admit I'm not super skilled or knowledgeable in Metroidvanias. I did used to play a lot of Mega Man X back in the day, so I do remember that movement is a critical point in terms of difficulty. With Rising, early on, I didn't have any really issues at all. Most enemies are simple and straightforward in their attack patterns, and with any small upgrades that you get, they tend to go down pretty quick. Even the first bosses didn't really do much to me. It wasn't until around the late game where some of the boss fights required a bit more finesse to handle. I specifically remember a battle with two massive direwolf enemies that had me popping pots like a madman, but it's likely due to my own clumsiness, which can be a point of contention. I was able to breeze by most of the early to mid game without needing to understand the deeper mechanics of any system. So when I finally met a boss that was actually proving to be more of a challenge, it was hard for me to figure out at what part before I should have picked up the skill I needed. So perhaps that is something that the game itself doesn't really do too well. The standard exploration and movement from A to B doesn't really provide any challenge. Most enemies are just reskinned with a new element, and the same old tactic can work each time. So when coming across a boss with a more unique mechanic, it can be a bit challenging to figure out if you're not used to playing Metroidvanias. So for newcomers, it's an easy to get into experience, and you'll likely have very little issues from early to the mid game, especially if you focus on those RPG elements and get those upgrades. However, be warned that late game will likely test you a bit more on the things that you may not have to deal with much. For veterans, I'm sure you can easily suss the deeper mechanics and exploit them earlier. However, for true veterans, I don't feel that this brings anything new to the table compared to games like Hollow Knight and such. Eat. Simply put, eat a lot. One of the first buildings you open up is Sarita's Tavern. This allows you to cook items that restore life and, more importantly, provide permanent stat buffs to your characters. The first of which is the rolled omelet that boosts your max HP by 5 every time you eat one. To make this, you need sugar, which drops en masse from the pom-pom enemies in the Great Forest, and the wild berg egg, which is farmable in the same zone. With a cheap cost of 75 bakwa, you can spam the ever-loving bejeebus out of this and boost CJ's health by ridiculous amounts early on. Past that, in my honest opinion, don't really go for any of the other upgrades in the tavern. The resource costs don't feel too proportionate for the buff that you get. For instance, farming fish for the attack power upgrade seems to pale in comparison to actually upgrading the attack power of your weapon. But health points are a commodity, and you can farm CJ's health points heavily, really heavily early on. Past that, upgrading your tools and bags are a priority as it opens more resource selection, and finally, weapon upgrades ensure the highest damage output. So, go ham! Eiyuden Chronicle Rising caught my eye as I was already attached to the core concept back from that Kickstarter. While not an authentic action RPG experience, its style of Metroidvania is approachable for both newcomers and veterans as a way to get excited for the upcoming mainline Eiyuden Chronicles game. Perhaps marred a bit by the overwhelmingly large amount of side quests, I do find the overall experience to be charming, and I hope that the success and support that this game receives on the Switch will get the core game ported as well, as it seems that still may be up in the air for 2023. Anyway, thank you so much for watching the video. Please let me know in the comments if you've been following this game's release, and let me know what games you hope we can get more spiritual successors of. Honestly, I would personally love to see another Xenogears or another Xenogears-inspired game that's a little bit different than Xenoblade Chronicles. But then again, I'm excited that 3's coming out. So otherwise, if you want to support the channel, subscribing is the best way. So thank you so much for sending your love. This is Show, and remember, if our backs are against the wall, let's switch strats. Cheers!